So Beverly Hills Cop is the movie that made Eddie Murphy a comedic icon, a global superstar when it dropped in 1984. Of course, he had done work before that. He had 48 Hours and Trading Places, very, very great comedies. But Beverly Hills Cop is really the movie that made him a movie star. And he went
Mm-hmm.
on, I would say, an unprecedented run for a movie star from the 80s pretty much, I would say, until like right at the new millennium, from 48
Mm-hmm.
hours all the way through to like the first couple of Shrek movies. Pretty unprecedented, incredible run. Had some
Yeah.
stinkers in there. Everything
Oh yeah.
didn't work, but from a consistency standpoint, he went on just really an unprecedented run that we haven't really seen from too many movie stars, especially from a black movie star of his stature. I mean, he was it in the 80s and in the early 90s, and Beverly Hills Cop is a large reason why. But in 1994, they made Beverly Hills Cop 3, pretty much a stinker, not a great movie. Even Eddie Murphy himself has acknowledged that that's just not a great movie. And since
It's not.
then, they have been working on a new Beverly Hills Cop movie pretty much that entire time. This movie has been in developmental hell for the better part of 30 years. Eddie Murphy always knew he wanted to come back and try to end out the franchise on a bit of a higher note than episode 3 did, than the Beverly Hills Cop 3 did, but they just couldn't figure out the story. They couldn't crack it. It went through many iterations, many stages, a lot of different directors until finally, just a couple of years ago, they landed on a new deal with Netflix. It was going to be a co-partnership with Netflix and Paramount. They got a director, they got the screenplay together, and they started to do casting. And they filmed this movie about a couple of years ago. And now Beverly Hills Cop Axel F has finally released to the world. It's finally out there, basically returning us to the story of Axel Foley in Detroit, once again making his way to Beverly Hills. But with all of that out the way, man, I will pass it over to you. What did you think about this latest installment in the Beverly Hills Cop franchise, Axel F?
Yeah, so I have a special relationship with the Beverly Hills movies, man. This is another one of those ones I think I just always watch with my mom. My mom Loki was like super hip. She acted like she wasn't, but she definitely was. She knows what she was doing. But like you said, man, when that first Beverly Hills Cop movie comes out, Eddie Murphy is on top. I mean, Party All the Time comes out like the next year after that. After that movie comes out, it's just crazy for Eddie Murphy, man. And I remember Beverly Hills Cop being played a lot in my house. I've seen that first one a lot of times. I've seen the second one probably a decent amount of times as well. Like I don't know, but I hearing that Beverly Hills Cop was coming back, I think on Netflix. Of course, I had my some pause, right? I mean, Netflix with another remake. I was like, here we go, Beverly Hills Cop. But Dolomite Is My Name was really good, so I was still excited to see Eddie Murphy on the big screen again, playing Axel Foley, man, and it turns out to be just okay to me. I didn't completely hate it, nor is it a really great movie to me either. I think it's just fine. It's watchable, but this movie does seek to go back into the past and give you some of those feels, particularly from the first movie, for real, but also for the first two movies. It seeks to go back, and there's Easter eggs, and they're playing some of the same music, and they're trying to give you the same vibe of what it was when you first watch again that first Beverly Hills Cop movie. But again, he's older now. Eddie Murphy's way older. Axel in the movie is older, and this time he has a daughter, played by Taylor Page, man. And it's probably one of my more favorite parts of the movie is him and his daughter are kind of estranged, and they haven't been talking for a while, and now it becomes a movie about this old cop, and his lawyer daughter trying to fight kind of crime. And I think I like that story, but everything around it is just fine to me. I think if a lot of it feels like something I've seen before. The case feels familiar. Kevin Bacon's character, who is playing, I think the villain here, feels like underdeveloped and also like a villain I had seen before. And a lot of these things felt like we were kind of going through the motions a little bit in watching it. I do like Joseph Gordon-Levitt and what he brought to the table, but I think this is just a fine movie. And if you like Beverly Hills Cop, it's an okay watch. And if you haven't watched Beverly Hills Cop, I actually don't know how much you're gonna like this movie. I don't know if you're gonna like pay attention and like it as much as somebody who has will. But Eddie Murphy hasn't changed. It's still wonderful to have him here. But overall, I think it was a fun return to Beverly Hills. But yeah, and that's really it. It was just okay for me. And we'll see what else happens. But I think I think this was an okay blast to the past, not a great one. And I think, to be honest, that's more probably than what I could ask for, because I was definitely worried in the first place.
The first Beverly Hills Cop from 1984, one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of the greatest comedies of all time. It really has stood the test of time. And upon just revisiting it again to get ready for Axel F, so many of the jokes still land. Eddie Murphy is on fire in that movie. It's pretty remarkable that at that young age, he was as good as he was, really kind of just coming fresh off of Saturday Night Live. But it just proved like why he became a superstar, based on that movie, because it was a global hit. It's one of the highest grossing comedies of all time, and it really did so much for his career. Every entry subsequently doesn't quite match that level, and even more so, Beverly Hills Cop 3 just dramatically just loses all steam in the franchise. And so I think by default, anything that they were going to do was probably going to be better than that, even though I was
For
always
sure.
hesitant and reticent to come into this and I think accept it for what it is. But we obviously know we're living in an era of legacy sequels, where a lot of stars, a lot of aging stars are returning to the franchises that made them who they are. This is obviously not a new trend. It's been going on for really kind of 20 years now, if we really think about it. And Eddie Murphy, in particular, has been on that particular stride as well. Just a couple of years ago, he did Coming to America, a sequel to that movie that took about 30 years to make. Not a great movie, but definitely something that wanted to try to recapture all of the vibes that the first one did. And that's what Beverly
Hmm.
Hills Cop Axel F does. It is the safest version of what you can do after being away from a franchise for 30 years, because they just knew that 3 was such a stinker. It shit the bed so badly that they just had to play it safe with this one. They had to hit all of the notes that felt familiar. They had to introduce all of the needle drops that we already knew and expected were going to be here. They had to give us some of the same cinematography, some of the same story beats. Even the ending in the third act takes place
Hmm.
in a big mansion, just like the first one does. There's a lot of the same stuff. It's very much Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So they took that formula and applied it to this. I can't be mad at it. I get it and I understand it, especially after that, because that last one was so bad. You have to really kind of go above and beyond to just get the goodwill of the audience back. And it took them 30 years
Hmm.
to kind of figure that out and crack the code. For me, I'm kind of the opposite of you, though, to be honest. The stuff
Hmm.
with Taylor Page and Joseph Gordon-Levitt didn't do anything for me. And I think
Hmm.
with a lot of these legacy sequels, for the most part, I really don't care about the new characters. Like that's a rarity. When a franchise or a film can do that, when they make me care about the new generation in conjunction with our older legacy characters, that's what sets them apart. That's what makes them
Yeah.
like individual great movies that don't have to rely on the legacy of what came before them. And here, I just don't feel like they did that. Taylor Page's character, she was fine. She was okay. Joseph Gordon-Levitt didn't really add anything to the movie for me at all.
Hmm.
He's such a great talent. I've seen him in so many things, and he just felt really underutilized here. But speaking of underutilization, the biggest disappointment for me is just the fact that Judge Reinhold and John Ashton came back for this to reunite with Eddie Murphy, and we don't really see them in the movie all that often, especially Judge Reinhold. And I know that they're
Especially Judge Ryan.
older.
Yep.
I know they're in their 60s and 70s, and so I get that some of that screen time can be it has to be limiting, and they can't really participate in the action, like they did when they were obviously a lot younger. But it's disappointing. It's disappointing when you don't see our 3 sort of main characters interact as much as I think you would like them to, based
Hmm.
on those original films. Even Paul Reiser, he has a little bit more to do, but I felt like he wasn't even in the movie enough, and
Yeah, he wasn't.
he goes into a different direction than how we see him in those first movies, which is interesting, but again, just underutilized in comparison to how much time we're spending with some of these other newer characters. And I would echo the sentiment about Kevin Bacon. Just doesn't add a ton really to the film at all. It's not the most interesting villain, and it doesn't feel as personal as it should. I think what always made
Hmm.
those first 2 really good in particular was how
Yeah.
personal everything was to Axel Foley. And they
Agreed.
tried to do something here, but I felt like they kind of came up short there. So it is okay. They could have done a lot worse. It's definitely better than 3. Like, some of the action is pretty good in
Yeah.
actuality. There's a helicopter scene that I thought was really impressive. There's a truck chase scene at the beginning of the movie that was pretty good. There was actually some solid action, a lot of practical stuff that they did. They didn't really rely too much on CGI, especially when you're doing something that feels like more grounded and more realistic.
Hmm.
So I appreciate it for that. It's something that I feel like I probably will revisit down the line. I'm certainly not rushing back to see it, but when I go back and rewatch the movies at some point in the future, I'm sure that I'll just, sort of round things out with this one. And I won't mind that experience. It does an okay job at rekindling and reestablishing what made those first 2 films in particular so great for Eddie Murphy. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. If you've checked out this movie on Netflix, hit us up and let us know what you think.